Welcome to the first go-to session of the month. This is the first of four sessions we'll have. Keep in mind that each of these sessions has an associated quiz that goes along with it. That quiz can be found if we go to the LA Film School main page here, right? You have this quiz. You have some other things to do this week, like there's an academic honesty quiz. That's a graded assignment worth 10%. We'll talk about this first discussion assignment a bit later in tonight's session. And there's a textbook related activity to complete. But the content quiz, okay, which is the quiz associated with this session that I'm delivering now, is right here, the 1.7 content quiz. And you'll notice that every week there's a similar content quiz, right? These are associated with each of the four go to training sessions. The good news is for those of you who are here live, you're getting it out of the way and you should be able to take the quiz if you want once the session is over. But these sessions are recorded for later viewing in case you need to review something or if you were unable to attend live. Recordings are always put here in the go to training session archives. Okay, so even if you can't attend live, you just watch a recording of the session and then go and take the quiz. Okay, so this is kind of an overview go-to session. I'll talk a little bit about the course. We'll also get into the first major assignment that is due on Sunday of this first week. But first of all, welcome to English Composition. There's me, Mr. Sussman, your instructor. And let me get away from this for just 1 second. I wanted to show one more thing on the platform. If you need to send me a question, right, if you have something that you need a response to, please use the envelope icon, which is right up here, to send me a message. If you send me a message, this lights up so that I can respond. And if I click on it, you can see some people have already contacted me with questions. You also have the option to leave comments under specific activities. The only problem with that is if you are looking for immediate feedback, those comments tend to get buried if you don't use the envelope icon. Because anytime you guys do anything, like literally anytime you sneeze, anytime you even access one of these activities, even if it's an ungraded activity just to read through it, I get a notification which appears here under this little bell looking thing. So as you can see, some people submitted such and such activity, and I get all these reports, including comments that you would have left for me. I try to keep my eyes out for those comments and respond to them, but if you need to hear back from me, if you have a specific question that needs responding to, please use the envelope icon. Okay, don't just, or I shouldn't say don't, but try to avoid just leaving comments randomly under certain activities because they're harder to spot. Okay. Here's the stuff I want to cover tonight. First of all, I do want to talk a bit more about the class in general, give some tips for success. I'll give some really basic info about me, your instructor, some final comments about the course, and then we'll get into what you actually need to do this week, specifically that first discussion that's already open and is due by Sunday. There is an assignment sheet that explains what you need to do for that assignment, but it's a bit more easy. It's a bit easier to understand once you've attended or watched this session. And then we'll leave things open for questions and answers. Though at any time you can use the chat function down below to type a message, and I'll try to keep my eyes open for those comments as well. Okay, so first of all, welcome. Okay, welcome to English class. Welcome. Well, you've been here. I don't know how many months you guys have been in the LA Film School program. So you're not brand new to the school, but you're probably somewhat near the beginning of your education. English, I believe you take fairly early on in your catalog of courses that you need to complete. But first of all, welcome, okay? That's what this welcome mat with the cute little picture of the cats represents. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to work with you guys. I've been teaching at the LA Film School for several months now. I like working with the LA Film School students because they're creative, they're ambitious, they're excited to work, one day in the industry, and I want you to sort of use that energy and apply it to this class. I know that English class may not be everyone's first choice, but I'll try to make it as fun and painless as possible. I promise. It's my goal to try to help make sure that everyone succeeds and passes the course, and along the way also learns important information and important skills. So keep that in mind, okay? I'm here for you. You can contact me pretty much anytime. that little envelope icon I showed you is the easiest way to get in contact with me. But there's a phone number that you can use. I'm even available on iChat most days. So, if you have questions, get in contact with me. And that actually leads into the next slide, which is tips for success in this class. And as you can see, I've purposely repeated ask questions. Okay, I'd say that's probably the most important piece of advice. Anytime that you're confused, anytime that you need direction or advice, anytime you're feeling unclear about a specific assignment, you need to let me know. That's one of the challenges of online classes. I actually love teaching online classes. They're terrific in so many ways. But one of the specific challenges is because we're not meeting face to face in a physical classroom, sometimes people can feel a bit isolated. And I try my best to sort of eliminate that feeling because lots of you might have families, you might have jobs, you have other responsibilities that take up your time, and if you're not really connected with the instructor, your classmates, there's always a danger that things can sort of drift, or you can start feeling isolated, or you can feel disconnected from the course, and I don't want that to happen. So anytime you need to speak to me, you need to get in touch with me. But in between, there's other useful things like attend these go-to sessions, like some of you are right now. Read all materials carefully, okay, especially the assignment sheets. I'll try to go over the assignments during the go-to session so that we have a good sense of what we're working on. But the assignment sheets go into much more detail, so reading through those is always important. Enroll over at McGraw-Hill Connect. How many people have done this? Anybody here? And actually, I'm going to go over to the McGraw-Hill site real quickly. Montana says sort of. Okay, not sure what that means. Okay, good. Taylor. I don't know if that's Danica or Danica. But while we're talking about the textbook site, why don't we go there real quickly? Okay, but good. It looks like a bunch of you have. And if you haven't, you still have time. I mean, not tons of time, but try to get signed up within the next day or two. Okay, so if I go into our class, by the way, textbook registration, if you go under the activity for textbook registration, there's a pretty complicated set of instructions on what to do. And certainly, if you need step by step instructions, please read through all this. But it's really as simple as going down to the bottom, finding this PDF file, opening it, scrolling down to the bottom, clicking, don't copy and paste this link, clicking directly on the link, and it will take you to the McGraw-Hill site where you can complete registration. You should have a registration code that was sent to your LA Film School address. Am I getting those steps mostly right? Is that what most of you needed to do to sign up? If I'm oversimplifying things, please clarify. But I believe it's that simple. I've sort of walked through the steps once before. Okay, good. People are confirming. Yeah, it's really is that simple. You just need to click on that link in the PDF, and you'll need that registration code that was sent to you. But if we go into the actual course site, you'll see something like this. Okay, here's our textbook, Engaging Questions. The great news is you never even have to really go to this textbook and click on it and find readings because all the readings are already pre-selected for you and are put down here. As you can see, they're organized by week. So if we go into week 1, you have these readings to do. And it looks like it's a lot, but it's not really. Like if I click on the first reading, what is good writing? And by the way, what is good writing will have a connection to what we're going to talk about in this session. The system is having difficulty. What do you mean the system's having difficulty? Let me try that one more time. Okay, now it's working. As you can see, there's the reading. It's pretty short. Most of the readings are like that. Some of them are a little bit longer, but none of them are terribly long. So don't avoid the simple task of reading these short chapters. Looks like I might need to fix some of these dates here. The other thing to keep in mind in addition to the readings is you have these 4 what are called Learn, Smart, Achieve modules. These are interactive programs that you need to complete online through this website. If you click on one of these, it will open up and it will walk you through the steps of setting up the module. But basically, it's a module that will it could take you anywhere from 1 hour to 3 hours to complete. That's for each individual module. But it's interactive and it takes you through a series of lessons and questions. And my first piece of advice to doing well in this class is to take advantage of completing these modules because you just get graded for completing them. Okay, I have no idea how, well, actually, I do have an idea of how long it takes you to complete it, but I don't really look at questions answered correctly or incorrectly. You just need to complete the module. It's adaptive, meaning the more questions you're answering incorrectly, the longer it will take you to complete. Taylor, yeah, some of the modules correspond with the readings pretty closely. You may not see the exact things repeated in the modules, but yes, they're designed so that when you're working through the module, it relates to whatever you needed to read for that week. But the modules are adaptive. So if you can't just click on them and start randomly clicking answers thinking, oh, I'm going to get through this in 5 minutes. No, because if you start answering things incorrectly, it will take longer to complete. But if you give it that good hour or two of honest work and get it to 100% completion, there's a way. I'm not sure how you see it on your end, but there's a way to check your progress and see what percentage you've completed. As long as you complete to 100%, you get all of those points. And if you look at the main page here, which I need to go back to, you'll see that these modules are worth, I think, 4% each, right? Yeah. Yes, 4%. Okay. And there are four of them, and they're all worth the same. So that's 16% of your grade. And that's 16% of your grade that are essentially gimme points, meaning you just do those interactive modules. And by the way, and I swear I'm not shilling for the company, people like the interactive modules. Okay, I mean I've been using them for months, and the feedback has been incredibly positive. Does everyone love them? No, but I'm kind of shocked that I'd say about 80% of students really find them useful and worthwhile. So it shouldn't feel like busy work. And even if it does, I mean, you get credit for just doing them. So take advantage of those easy 16% worth of points for the entire month. So that's the McGraw-Hill site. Okay, so you have your readings here, and you have these weekly modules to keep up on. And I believe they're set to due. Yeah, basically everything's always due on a Sunday. Every week you have a number of things to complete, and they're all due on Sunday. The only exception are the go-to quizzes, right? These content quizzes that are associated with these go-to sessions. Those are always due on the Thursday of the week because I need to make pretty sure that you understand what we're working on and what you need to do by Thursday of each week so that I can identify people who are having trouble or people who have questions or people who are confused. So those are always due on Thursday of each week, but everything else is due on Sunday. Okay, let me get away from that. So yeah, enroll in McGraw Hill. Take advantage of those gimme points, and the gimme points aren't just the McGraw Hill stuff, but also like some of those quizzes. There's an academic honesty quiz, which isn't terribly difficult. There are, as I said, four go-to quiz related tests that you need to complete every week. Those aren't terribly difficult. So there really is like 40% or more of this class that can be completely in your back pocket if you'll just take advantage of it. And it can be frustrating because I see people who perhaps struggle, and one of the reasons they struggle is they miss out on these really easy points. So please take advantage of them because if you take advantage of them fully, you'll be in such a strong position that I won't say that it's impossible not to pass the course, but it's you're in a pretty good position to pass if you take advantage of that. Okay, moving on. My final tip, of course, is just to be positive. Okay, hang in there. I know that we're on a 1 month schedule, so things move fast. As I said, you have families, some of you have jobs, right? You have lots of things to juggle. I understand that it's difficult sometimes to fit schoolwork into that schedule, but always be positive. Hang in there. Try to keep in touch with your classmates. Try to visit those discussion boards every week and participate. Get in touch with me if you're feeling like you're drifting or that you're confused or that you need help or direction, because that will really carry you through, I think, most of what we need to do this month. Okay, let me take a sip from my drink. Okay, there's me. I know, it looks like a prison mug photo or something. Mugshot photo. Uh, but there's your instructor. There's some quick facts about me. I have about 15 years teaching experience. My interests, my specific interests, are film. I've taught introduction to film at another university. Music, it's not something I professionally studied, but I play piano. I have a strong interest in music. My main area, because I'm an English teacher, is literature, creative writing. I've taught creative writing as well. So even though I haven't taught like screenwriting, I am tapped into the sort of creative industries. Okay, film, music, writing, and even some of the other degree offerings here at the LA Film School. Like there aren't as many of them, but we have some game design people. I also, I should never admit this. I own a PlayStation 3. So pretty much whatever you're here to study, I feel pretty confident that I have a strong interest and background in those areas, which is awesome. Because if you haven't noticed already, one of the great things about the LA Film School is that typically you have instructors who either have concrete backgrounds in the industry or they have strong passions within those industries. So you're not being taught by someone who's completely oblivious to, for example, film studies or music or what have you. By the way, if people could, if you could type real quickly in the chat box what you are studying here at the LA Film School. Most people tend to fall into film and music in the months that I've taught, but some people are in other areas. Okay, music production, music production. Okay, animation. Yeah, I forgot that one. Film related, but a little bit different. Um, oh, okay. Let's move on to the next slide because after that, there's just a couple jokes here. Some more information about me. Probably too much information, but real quickly, here are some of the other places I've taught. University of Alabama, so a little bit depressing to see the Crimson Tide lose on New Year's Day to Ohio State, but okay. Ohio University, not Ohio State, but Ohio University, the University of Missouri, other places. Missouri Valley College, that's a small private school in Missouri. Uh, Community College, the LA Film School, so lots of different places. And some of the courses I've taught over those 15 years includes composition, like what you're taking right now, literature, business writing, creative writing, introduction to film, and digital literacy. Okay, you've taken digital literacy here at the LA Film School, I believe, already. Okay, we've already talked about McGraw-Hill Connect, so I'm going to skip this slide. Okay, if you have tech related issues, sure, you can come to me with them, but if I can't figure them out, I mean, I can figure out simple things. If you have a quick question about, I don't know, textbook registration, I can probably help with that. But some more serious issues, you need to kind of memorize these things. Or actually, I'll even point to a place you can find this information if you forget it. But LAO support, okay, that's the LA Film School support. You can email them at support at lafilm.edu, or you can just call them at 877-349-3456. So you could jot these things down, or you could take a screenshot, or if you go to the main activities page, and if you click on the About tab, you'll see that there's a whole slew of documents down below. Okay, everything from course at a glance. And by the way, all this stuff is incredibly useful. Like the course at a glance gives you an idea of what we're doing week to week and when things are due. So take some time and click through this. But you'll also find at the bottom the support fact card, which I already have open. So if you didn't jot down those phone numbers, here you go, toll free number. That other number I did put on the page works as well, but I guess this is the official toll free number, 844. I think I have 877. The support email address I gave on the slide, that also works, but they have an alternate one here. Okay, online support at lafilm.edu. So anytime you need to sort of get in touch with these people, you have this fact card. Okay, where were we? There is a late policy for work in this class. As I said, everything's due on Sundays typically, except for the quizzes associated with these go-to sessions. However, if I don't know, you're having a bad week, or you have a family emergency, or your boss has asked you to put in 20 hours of work over the weekend and you don't get things done by Sunday, there is a 3-day grace period. There is a penalty associated with each day that something is handed in late. It's 10 points per day. But if for some reason you can't get something completed by Sunday night, it's not a lost cause. It's always better to hand in work, even if it comes with a reduced grade, than not handing things in at all. After all, even a grade of a 70, which would be a pretty low grade, that would be like a D minus, is still, you can recover from that. right? All you need to do is nail 100 on another assignment, and that will kind of balance things out. But if you don't complete an assignment at all, that's just a zero, and zeros are much more difficult to recover from. So keep in mind there is a late policy. There is a sort of 3-day window after the due date's closed to get things handed in for a reduced grade. This does not apply to discussion boards. I mean, I'll give some credit if you can do some main parts of a discussion late, but really you need to try your hardest just to get things done on time. Specifically with discussions are like conversations. So when a conversation ends, it's sort of hard to jump in and start talking. For that reason, discussions are really important to get done on time. And that's actually the first major assignment you need to work on this week. Okay, any questions so far about the course overall or the late policy or what we're doing in general? I'm going to move on and take a sip from my Diet Coke real quick. Okay, so you're in English composition, right? It should seem kind of obvious, perhaps, what English composition is. Has anybody taken an English composition course at another college or university? Probably most of you have taken, I mean, they might not have called it literally English composition, but you probably took classes in high school. This is sort of like that and sort of not. It's been a long, long time since I've been in high school, more than 20 years. But, English class, from what I remembered, you do a variety of things. You read books, short stories, sometimes novels, poetry, essays, fiction books, nonfiction books, biographies, short things, long things, and yeah, in between you have writing assignments. This is a little bit different in that we're not going to be reading literature, we're not going to be reading plays or poetry or anything like that. It's really sort of a nuts and bolts course that focuses on essay writing. But let's start talking about writing in general, and specifically this notion of like, what is it that drives writing? I mean, we're here all month to talk about writing. And ultimately, we're working toward you producing a final polished essay, which will be your sort of final project that's due in week 4. But before we get into those sorts of things, I think it's important to talk about writing in general. What makes good writing? And you can respond in the chat box just personally, or if you've done some of the readings over at the textbook site, you can draw upon that. But let's start talking about like, okay, we're here to be writers. Okay, I'm a writer. I just have more experience probably doing it. But we're all writers. Maybe some of us write more than others do. But we're all technically writers. So what makes good writing? Like if I had to ask you what makes good, strong writing, what are some of the things you could come up with? Anwar says clarity, originality. Okay, good. Yeah, clarity is super important, right? Because that could apply to anything from individual sentences that need to be clear and understandable, but it can also occur at the bigger level, the macro level. Are those sentences working hand in hand with one another, right? That sentences should be speaking to the sentences that follow. Is the essay organized into paragraphs instead of just one long, never-ending chunk? Is there a strategy behind the writing? Meaning, are we clear about what the topic is from the very beginning, and then we see individual points laid out as we progress? So yeah, clarity is a big, big issue. Other things, good stuff here. Montana says honesty. Yeah, I've never heard a student mention that before, but I think that's a really, really important one because I don't care if you're writing, I don't know, a sci-fi novel or a cover letter or an essay or an article. I think one of the things that you're trying to do as a writer is to be as honest as possible. Even if that means, I don't know, you're writing a fictional piece that involves characters who constantly lie. You, as the author, are trying to be as honest as you can to the material. And that goes for practical things too. A cover letter for a job, a resume, your shopping list. If you're being really honest, you'll leave those potato chips off the list. But yeah, honesty I think is actually a really good one. Danica or Danica? Danica, you'll have to give me some sort of indication, like how that's supposed to be pronounced. Good thesis, yeah. For this class, I think that's paramount. A good thesis will be an important part of what you'll do in this class. There are types of writing though that you would never really literally create a thesis for. Informal types of writing won't have a thesis. Fictional or creative pieces typically won't have a thesis. But lots of writing does have a sort of focus that's made clear early on in the piece. So even if it doesn't officially appear as a thesis sentence, there is an understanding what the topic is and what the focus is early on, which is kind of similar to what a thesis does. Quentin says keeping audience in mind. Yeah, that's a big one too. We're going to talk about audience for this class because it's going to be crucial for the essay you're going to be building toward this month. But audience, sometimes we talk about audience in theory and students here, yeah, audience, blah, blah, blah. But audience really is important. I mean, think about, for example, the examples I gave of cover letters or resumes. If your resume is all over the place and it's just disorganized, obviously that's not meeting your audience's needs. Other types of writing function that way as well. I mean, even as something as simple as a set of instructions. If those set of instructions aren't clear to the other person who can read it, or let's say they're instructions that a child has to follow, but you've written it in such a way that a child could not follow along, then obviously it's not working because you're not considering audience. So audience, the importance of audience isn't just something that's important in theory. We should always be hyper aware of who we're trying to reach and who we're trying to speak to. For instance, I'm speaking in a very particular way now because I think this is the best way to communicate what I need to communicate to you guys. On the other hand, on a weekend when I'm just hanging out with friends watching football, I might speak in a completely different voice in a completely different kind of language. Typically, there might be a lot more a lot more cursing. But audience, right? One kind of way of speaking is correct for one group of people that would be completely inappropriate or ineffective for another group. Anwar says proper grammar. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can make exceptions and say that if we're writing a creative piece and we're trying to capture the dialect of a certain character, we can break the rules, and that's true. But usually, we're breaking the rules because we already know the rules. And Taylor says something that entices the reader. Yeah, I think that's pretty crucial too. I mean, we're going to be working on a somewhat more formal essay for this class, but still, we're going to talk eventually about how we can engage the reader from the very beginning of that essay. So, great responses. Wow, really, really terrific. As a matter of fact, I can't think of anything to add. You guys pretty much covered it. Now, why am I asking this? Because your personal definition of good writing that hopefully also combines stuff we've talked about in this session, things you'll encounter in that reading. Remember, I just showed that really short reading in the textbook site under the chapter, What is Good Writing? So you can fold in personal and other concepts that have been introduced because it's going to be part of your week one discussion assignment, which I'm going to discuss in just a second. But first of all, let me give you a glimpse at what we're working toward this month. We're building toward a 2 to 4 page essay due at the end of the month. Okay, so we're building this essay piece by piece, and each week's activities are designed to help you construct that essay. This week we're mostly going to focus on topic selection. Other weeks we'll get into research, how to conduct research, and how to incorporate research into your paper. Later on we'll get into organizational issues so that by week 4 you'll pretty much have all the pieces in place to sit down and actually write it and not feel lost, not feel confused, not feel like, well, I don't know quite what to put on the page because you'll have done a lot of the legwork already. But here is what we're writing. Okay, so it's not a 2 to 4 page essay on anything. It's not you just picking a topic and randomly writing for 4 pages. No, no, no. What we're specifically going to do is there are parameters for this essay. Each of you are going to pick what you think is a specific industry related problem. For a lot of you, that will be probably something in the film or music industry. Okay? You're going to identify a current industry problem. You're going to inform a specific audience about this problem and come up with a targeted solution. And some other nitpicky things, like eventually you'll have to fold in some research so that you're backing up what you say. And then we'll get into APA format in another session. But yeah, your essay will have to follow the guidelines for APA format, which is something that covers everything from the layout of your essay, margins, spacing, page numbers, but it also includes that slightly more nitpicky stuff like how to properly cite, how to create a references page, all that. Okay, but if you keep in mind, this is what we're doing for the month, because sometimes when we move from week to week to week, students can lose sight of like the bigger picture, but never lose sight of the bigger picture and how simple it really is. We're working toward a short essay where you identify a problem, educate or give some information about that problem. In later weeks, we'll even set up the overall organization for your paper. For example, we're really working toward a 5 paragraph paper. So, an introduction of some kind that briefly defines the issue and ends with a clear thesis. 3 separate body paragraphs where you'll make 3 separate points about the issue you're addressing. And then finally, near the end of the essay, that's where you'll kind of discuss your solution to the problem. Montana asks, what do you exactly mean by library research? The LA Film School has a library database, which is where you'll conduct some of your research. You can also conduct some research online as long as it comes from a trustworthy source, which I believe you learned about in digital literacy. So things like Wikipedia aren't really trusted. People's personal blogs aren't trustworthy sites. But if you find a New York Times article online, or it doesn't even have to be that fancy, it could be something from CNN or USA Today, something that has a proven track record and has editors that has layers of people making sure that the information is more or less correct. That kind of research, and you'll need that research because, and by the way, we'll get into what we're looking for when I say find an industry related issue or problem in just a second. But part of what you'll need to do is prove that this problem, this issue exists. Because if you're just speaking off the top of your head, that's not maybe terribly convincing. But if you can bring in facts, statistics, brief quotations, that can help solidify the case you're trying to make. Okay, so obviously, if we're working toward this essay, first we need to find an industry related problem that's current, that's real, that's concrete, that most reasonable people could sit down and say, yes, this is an important issue and needs to be addressed. So let's brainstorm. We'll see how this goes. It might work really well, or it might crash and burn. It sounded like we have had a bunch of music people in the room. What were some of the other areas? I forget. Someone had a non-music related thing, but to the music people, or there's someone here in animation. But we had 3 or 4 music people in the room. Like, what's a contemporary issue in the music industry? Like, if you had to identify a problem that needs awareness, a problem that people need to be educated about, a problem that needs to be solved. Um, any ideas off the top of your head? Anwar says digital distribution. Okay, I think I know what that means, but I'm not sure. What's the problem there? I mean, by the way, digital distribution all by itself doesn't tell me what the problem is. Um, is there a problem with the handling of it? Is there? I mean, like, what's the specific problem that needs a solution that needs to be fixed? Montana says many artists find it difficult to get jobs in the music industry. Okay, that sounds like it's on an interesting path. By the way, you have time to develop these topics somewhat, so I don't expect you to have perfect ideas right off the top of your head right now. And research will also help you define the issue perhaps a little bit better. You might find that you're speaking about it more specifically and more eloquently once you do research. But if you can prove a problem that right now there are people either graduating from school or maybe they don't go to school at all, but when they try to find gigs and jobs that's just not happening, then yeah, that's a real issue. That's a real problem. Quentin says it's too hard to track record sales, and streaming is robbing the artists. Okay, those sound great. I would argue maybe those are 2 separate issues. Like the tracking of record sales, that seems like an issue that definitely could receive attention, and possibly through research you'll ultimately come up with a possible solution. Streaming robbing artists. I'm not sure what you mean. Are you talking about the low royalty rates that are paid out to artists through streaming music services? Okay, great. That's an awesome topic too. That's a real issue, right? I mean, Taylor Swift. She made news because she pulled her music from Spotify. Um, and there were some other shocking stories. Like you you would never remember this band, but back in the '90s, there was this group named Cracker, and they had a pretty big hit with a song called "Low." You probably would recognize the song if you went to YouTube and typed in "Crackers Low" or something like that. Uh, but he's been a very very vocal person on this issue because he received a check last year for like $44 because that was the cut he received, and it was a pretty big song in the '90s. I mean, how many people are looking for that song? Maybe not that many, but considering it was a pretty big hit, there are probably tens of thousands of people who maybe do searches for that song on streaming music. And to think that this guy only gets like $44, that's pretty low. So yeah, there's great issue. Low royalty rates paid out by streaming music companies to artists. Um, Awesome. Taylor says something about YouTube, Facebook are generating cutter artists. I'm not sure what that means. I'm not saying that it's not an issue. I just don't understand. Um, like when I think of YouTube and Facebook, and by the way, I could be badly out of touch, which I sometimes am, but I didn't know about YouTube and Facebook literally generating artists. There was something interesting about YouTube, right? Aren't they switching to this new platform that independent artists got very angry about because they're only making deals YouTube with the major labels and they're sort of leaving the independent artists out. I might be getting some of those details a bit wrong, but do people remember this story? Like, there's an issue. If YouTube is trying to get toward a more premium service, but they're only making deals with established artists signed to major labels and ignoring the many independent artists that are out there, and some of whom are really, really big names, like Adele, I guess technically is an independent artist, Macklemore, independent artist, right? That's an issue. Uh, wow, is that true, Quentin? Pharrell only made $4,000 off of the streaming of Happy. That song you could not like every time you turn on your radio, you couldn't stop hearing that song. That and what was that John Legend song? All of Me or All of You? I can't remember which. Yeah, so that's pretty shocking. That's why these are real issues. By the way, great job. Like these are really good concrete issues, and that's what we're looking for. So let me go to the next slide because I'm going to talk about the issues that or the topics that don't really work well for this month's assignments. Oh, before I get to that, here's some tips for finding your issue. If you know people who work in the industry, pick their brains. Okay, so if you know people, talk to them. They don't have to be major people. I don't care if you don't know Pharrell Williams, but you might know someone who has industry experience. Or you could read industry-related journals, magazines, newspapers. Google. Okay, Google is your friend. Later, we'll talk about trustworthy versus non-trustworthy sources. But hey, to start, Googling is awesome. You can search for current debates, current controversies, current challenges, etc. Troubling trends. Yeah, if you go to Google and type in, I don't know, current problems in the music industry, you'll probably get tons of results. Okay, so you just need to find your concrete issue. And that also helps because some people already kind of know possible topics, like some of the things you guys have been mentioning in the chat are already awesome, and you can kind of tell that I'm already giving them approval if you want to work on those. But for those of you who don't know your industries well, or don't know of a contemporary current issue or problem, that's fine. But you'll just need to find your issue. A big part of being here at the LA Film School is that you're here to learn about your industry. So this course is also designed to get you moving on that. Okay, so it's fine if you don't know your industry terribly well, but hopefully this assignment also sort of lights a fire beneath you to get you moving to learn more about your industry. In general, social issues, tech issues, health and safety concerns, financial issues tend to work well. So think of those broad categories as well. Okay, maybe there's a disturbing social trend. Maybe there's a tech issue that's really, really damaging and needs to be solved. Maybe there's a health and safety concern that needs to be addressed that people keep ignoring. So think about those sorts of categories as well. Okay, so here are the topics that typically don't work too well. And I put them in two categories and I put them on two different slides. The first category is Topics that are too broad or that are too rooted in personal opinion. Okay, what I loved about the topics that have already been suggested in the chat is that they're very concrete and they're very real. Okay, few people would disagree that the royalty rates paid out by streaming music companies are low. That's a real issue. I mentioned the YouTube switching to a premium music service and how they're leaving independent artists out in the cold. Like, that's a real issue. But here are things that aren't really issues or problems. Things like Hollywood is unoriginal, or movies are terrible today compared to the past, or movies have too much sex and violence, and all movies should be family friendly. Yeah, I mean, all these topics are very broad, but they're also rooted in personal opinion. Like, I get what the person is saying when Hollywood is unoriginal. Sometimes you see all these big budget movies, and that can certainly make you feel that way. But on the other hand, there's more entertainment available now, no matter what your specific area of interest, right? You want sci-fi anime, you can find it on Netflix or Hulu. You want independent, well-written dramas, you can find them. Okay, I would actually argue there's more original content being made, and that's the problem with a lot of these. They're very broad, but they're also rooted in personal opinion. Sometimes I get music topics like music today is terrible compared to generations past, and it's like, okay, you feel that way. And by the way, we all have strong opinions, right? Like, I think Taylor Swift is a goddess who was brought down to earth to create pleasure for all of us, but I would never write an essay pushing for that because that's not an industry issue or problem or concern. That's just me giving my opinion. So we need to move past just pure opinion and actually focus on something concrete and real. And there's a practical reason for this as well, because when it comes time to research things, you'll have a much easier time if you actually have a real concrete topic, rather than something that's entirely rooted in personal opinion. Does that make sense? And I hate to sound harsh. I'm not trying to be like, the guy who's already telling people what to write about or what not to write about. It's just from experience, I know that topics that begin in personal opinion lead to trouble further down the road. The other main category that I would say be careful about are topics where there is no problem or issue. For example, film has made such great technological advances, or Pixar is an amazing company that has redefined animation, or the history of African American directors is fascinating. I agree. I agree. But how are these problems or issues? So I'd say those are the two broad things to be careful of, beginning with personal opinion and identifying that personal opinion as a sweeping industry problem, or choosing topics that are just sort of factual. They're just statements, because these sorts of topics that will lead to reports, not persuasive pieces, and that's kind of what we're working on as well. I mean, I don't want to reveal too much about the thinking behind these assignments, but what I like about the assignment where you need to target a specific industry issue, do some research on it, and propose a possible solution is that it forces you to do the sorts of things that writing is really, really terrific at, like being aware of audience, like having a clear focus, incorporating research, being persuasive. And yeah, when you just choose something that's strictly factual, that leads down the road to creating a report, not a persuasive researched piece of writing. Okay, so let me see what's on the next slide. Let me get back. So my advice here is to, if you don't know your topic yet, start researching, like now, like right now. Well, okay, not right now because I want you to stay in the room. But yeah, when the session is over, start Googling, start contacting friends, start reading. Find that very real, concrete, industry specific issue that you want to work on all month. Work on in terms of researching and ultimately kind of developing a solution. Okay, so let's talk about what you're working on this week, the major assignment, which is the discussion assignment called Laying the Foundation. Okay, this is the first major assignment. It's worth 10% of your grade. It's already open and it ends on Sunday. Blah, blah, blah. You need to read. Oh, actually, I shouldn't say blah, blah, blah. If I go back to the main page, okay, activities. In addition to the textbook readings, you have a bunch of ungraded activities right here on the platform that you also need to go through. Okay, so for week one, there's a little thing here on effective communication. Actually, week one is a little bit lighter. Week two, there's a lot more stuff. But make sure that you're going through all these activities, not just clicking on them to say complete if you haven't completed them, but making sure that you've gone through each of these ungraded activities. I know that because they're ungraded, it's tempting not to take them seriously because after all, I'm not going to be grading them. But make sure that you go through all this stuff because it helps set you up for the assignments that we're working on each week. Okay, essentially the laying the foundation discussion board assignment is pretty easy because here's what you're doing. I don't want to make it sound like it's so easy that you don't have to put effort into it, but it's pretty easy to understand. First, you're going to define what good writing means. Okay, so we've already talked about that. You guys came up with awesome responses. So your definition of good writing, yes, rely on what you personally think is good. Uh, Fold in concepts that we talked about in this session. Use the stuff that's presented to you in the textbook reading, but come up with some good nuggets, let me put it that way, on what good writing means. Second, you'll identify that industry problem or issue. Mention who was affected by it and why this issue is important. Okay? Yeah, Montana, there is a word amount requirement, which I'll show in just 2 seconds. But this is your chance to present your issue to me. You don't have to wait until the discussion to run it by me. You can click on that envelope icon and discuss with me what you're thinking about. So if you're nervous about, you know, getting my more or less approval before you post to the board, that's fine. Just let me know. And finally, the third part is to discuss how you will use good writing, which you defined up here, when it comes time to write your essay about this issue. Okay, so a lot of it's kind of in your hands. You define good writing, you present your industry problem or issue, and then you sort of brainstorm about what you'll need to do when it comes time to write the essay to do so effectively. Part two, you need to respond to at least two of your classmates' posts. Okay, so you've posted your thoughts about good writing, your issue. You need to respond to at least two of your classmates' posts. And if we switch to the assignment sheet, because Montana was asking about word count requirements, yeah, this is why always go through the assignment sheets because you get a lot more information than I'm giving you here. So you'll see there's a 300 word minimum for the initial post. That's not terribly long. That's about like a page of double spaced text. And then at least 150 words for each classmate's, your response to each classmate. And everything I just went over that slide, it's repeated here. So if you are thinking, wow, I can't quite remember what he said in that session, it's here on the assignment sheet, okay? Define good writing, identify your issue, discuss how you're going to use good writing when it comes to writing the essay. And then write at least two responses to your classmates. You get lots of frequently asked questions, so please go through that. Okay. Be sure to follow the rules of good writing, right? Grammar, mechanics, all that kind of stuff, because there are penalties for doing things like writing in text speak. Text speak to me is, things like putting the lowercase I instead of capital I when you're talking about yourself. Every piece of writing you do in this class, whether it's a message to me, whether it's a post on a discussion board, or whether it's an essay, needs to be following professional writing principles. And if you're curious about how this is graded, you get a grading rubric on the next page so you can see what you're going for. Let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger. How about 125? What you see here is what's called the RISE model. This is a chart that gives you suggestions on how to respond effectively to your classmates' post. You'll see it's broken down into 4 broad categories of what you should be doing: reflecting on what your classmates have written, inquiring about what they've written, making suggestions, and elevating the discussion to a higher level. And you get examples here of, for example, what meets the basic standards of truly reflecting on someone's work and what does not meet the standards. And it gives you examples. Same thing for the rest of these categories. If you need to take a screenshot of this, I encourage you to do it now, because if not, you'll just have to find the spot in the video to do so. But essentially, yeah, the most useful thing here, I would say, is to look at the examples. So, for example, inquiring means, well, asking thought-provoking questions. Have you considered X? Or when you said this, am I understanding it correctly to mean that you wanted to say blah, blah, blah? Making suggestions, right? Concrete, constructive advice on how your classmate could improve. You might consider tweaking X, or you might want to think about including Y. Okay, so if you're really, really sort of lost or confused, or you're not quite sure how to respond, this RISE model chart is very, very helpful. Or you can use intuition. Okay, people can do this without referring to the chart. And I'll give a really basic explanation of how to do this. When it comes to your classmates' posts, okay, so they'll present their notions on good writing, they'll present their industry topic. Your focus should always be on what they've truly written, especially that middle part. I mean, the other stuff is important too, but when they propose their specific issue, like that's the time to really think about what they've written and inquire about it, ask questions, make suggestions. So, for example, if someone posted to the board, an important industry issue to me is that music is awful today, and we need to stop relying so much on electronic music or something like that. It's perfectly fine to find a polite way to say, that's interesting, but it feels like it's a bit too rooted in personal opinion, or I understand that you feel that way, but I'm not sure this is. Most people would agree this is a sweeping industry-wide problem. Okay, so really, I'm not saying you have to be confrontational or challenging. You certainly want to point out what's working well, but always be specific about what's working well, about what could be improved. You might agree with their notions on what makes good writing, or you might want to suggest something that they didn't consider. Okay, so the focus should always be on the content of what your classmates have presented and really interacting with it. If you're doing that, whether you're following this RISE model or you're just doing it naturally on your own, you'll probably do just fine grade wise. Because if we go back to the rubric, you'll see that there are several categories for responses to classmates. You can receive up to 30 points maximum for these responses. And to get the maximum amount of points, the two responses should be specific, detailed, and contribute to the discussion. Right? You, as the responder, respond to your classmates with specific examples. You ask questions that further the discussion. Okay, so the rubric also gives you an idea of what sort of exceeds the requirements, what meets the requirements, and what falls a little bit below the requirements. But again, someone mentioned honesty earlier. Well, in terms of defining good writing, well, follow that principle yourself when you're responding to your classmates. Respond as honestly and concretely and as helpfully as possible, and you'll be doing just fine, I think. Okay, good news is we're getting near the end of the session. I think I only have a couple more slides. The last thing I want to mention is audience. Okay, I was so thrilled when someone mentioned audience in the chat box when we were talking about good writing, because audience is the most important thing to keep in mind. Early on, I'm not going to talk about audience too much, but later, as we get near the completion of your essay, we will talk about audience and its importance even more. Because, for example, someone mentioned the low royalty rates paid out to artists by streaming music companies. Ultimately, let's say that person, I can't remember who said it, Quentin maybe, ultimately, Quentin will have to come up with a solution to this problem. And by the way, in future weeks, we'll talk specifically about the solution requirement and how you don't need to come up with some earth-shattering, huge changing solution. You just need to come up with a practical, reasonable step a person could follow to make the situation better. But that means targeting a specific audience. Okay, each of your industry related topics, once you find one, will not be addressed to everyone. Okay, your music related topic might try to reach out to the music fans themselves to do something, or it might reach out to artists, or it might reach out to CEOs of major labels, right? Each audience would require a slightly different strategy. Some of the information, core material might be the same, but ultimately when it comes to coming up with a solution and the best way to sort of try to reach a specific person to do something about it, that means keeping audience in mind. Which leads me into my final slide, which is audience related. There's something called the rhetorical situation, which is often captured as a triangle. And I'm going to try to keep this as simple and straightforward as possible. If we look at this triangle, we have three elements here: the writer, the reader, and the text. By the way, text can be used in the broadest sense possible. So yes, written words in an essay, that's a text. But a film is a text, a song is a text, a television show is a text. You could replace the word writer with creator, right? Because a writer can be someone who writes songs or directs a film, and same thing for reader. A broader term might be audience. But let's stick with these words: writer, reader, text. The thing I want you to understand is you change any single one of these elements and it affects the other two. And let me give a really basic example of this. Imagine that you need to give a set of instructions to someone else in order for them to complete something. For example, a task. Well, you would take a much different strategy if those instructions were being read by a child, right? Someone, say, who's 8 years old, than someone who's 25. You would make different choices in terms of word selection. You would make different choices in the way maybe that you present the material. If you needed to make some sort of comparison, you would use one that would make sense to a child, but use a completely different one that would make sense to an adult. Okay, but let's get away from the example of children versus adults and apply it to your essay. Ultimately, you're going to be addressing an industry issue and encouraging change. So changing audience affects the other two angles of the triangle, right? So think back to the example of low royalty rates paid out by streaming music companies. If you're trying to reach music fans, encouraging them to do something as part of the solution, that would affect choices you make as the writer to reach them. And the choices and the changes you make as a writer will obviously show up in the text itself. So that's the rhetorical situation. It's that audience is so important that you change any element, you change the audience, you change the form of the text, right? A written piece would have much different requirements than, let's say, a video piece. But you change any one of these elements and it affects the other two. So try to keep these things in mind because we're going to return to them throughout the month. The importance of audience and how it's going to affect the choices you make as you work toward your essay. Okay, questions. That is the end of my presentation. I know we've covered a lot. Okay, we've talked about the course, we've talked about the textbook, we talked about this week's first assignment, we talked about topics, what sorts of topics work for this month's task and which sorts don't. But are there any questions regarding any of that you need to ask now? Okay, I'm not seeing a lot of questions. I am hoping, I'm crossing my fingers, that just means that I explained things so clearly, right? That my discussion was so lucid and so error free that you're all set. Is that the case? Quentin says it's pretty good. Well, at least Quentin isn't brown nosing, because other people say, "Yeah, it was awesome," and really they just want to run away from the room and go do things, which I understand as well, by the way. Okay, if you think you're comfortable with the material, if you think you need to know, if you feel comfortable with what you need to do, step one, find a topic that's going to work for this month's activities, and you know what to do for the first discussion board assignment. Oh, before I let you go, that's the last thing I wanted to mention. I don't really police people in terms of you must have your initial post done by Thursday, and then you must respond to two other people before Sunday. I just trust you to get working on it as soon as you can. But please don't just leave everything until Sunday, because if nobody's posting to the board until Sunday, that means everybody's going to just be running to get things done. So see if you can at least make your initial post earlier than that, and then you can always revisit the board to respond to others. I'll speak with Anwar if he needs help. For those people who do feel pretty comfortable and clear on what we've covered, you're allowed to go. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Thanks so much for showing up, and we'll do this again next week. Same time, same bat channel. Not sure how many people understand that reference anymore. It's kind of dated. Okay, let me stop the recording.